Also, my friends, Joseph Varghese here, and welcome to our podcast, rulesforsuccess.com. I'm here with my good friend, somebody I've known for 15 plus years, and her husband, John. I've known them for 15 plus years, and she is a master at coaching singers and speakers and beyond relational presence. There's Jennifer Hamady. Jennifer has a very unique background. So she's a voice performance coach as well as a therapist specializing in communication and self-expression. Her clients include Grammy and Emmy award award winners, TEDx speakers, contestants on The Voice, American Idol, corporate executives from Google, IBM, Merrill Lynch, and others. She is the author of three books on the psychology of creative and personal performance and self-expression, and she writes regularly on the topic for Psychology Today. Her brand is Finding Your Voice, findingyourvoice.com. You can tap into that. We'll have all the links onto our website, rulesforsuccess.com. I'm just excited. We go back for a long time, and she and her husband have been huge influences in my life. Certain things have happened in my life that I believe were because I was in proximity to her many years ago. So Jennifer, how are you today?
Oh, I'm great. And it's so great to see you and to be with you. And thank you for that beautiful introduction and those kind
Yeah, you're
words.
welcome.
John and I love you and your family.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I've seen you early stages, marriage, having your son Lucas, who's in sixth grade now. It's been quite a journey. Um,
Mhm.
I'm. Did you always know you wanted to teach voice, to study voice, and did you always know that?
Mhm. So I thought you were going to say, did you always know you wanted to be a parent? It's a
Okay.
very different conversation, but
That's a
did
whole
I?
different conversation. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I'll follow you wherever you want to go. But did I always know I wanted to teach voice? Teach voice? No, I has sang my whole life. I mean, even from before when I remember singing, my parents say that I just basically didn't speak. I was always singing, and that's all I ever wanted to do.
Yeah.
Um, loved it. And then to make a long story short, when I was touring and giving master classes, I would, in between shows, I would get people coming up to me and emails as well, people saying, how do you do this? How do you do this? And I kept getting the same questions.
Hmm.
And that's how my first book was born in response. And as well, I just said, I've never been a teacher, but I can try to show you what I know. And that's how that started. Oh, there it
His
is.
first book, The Art
There's
of Saying.
my firstborn, my other firstborn,
Yes.
my
No,
literary firstborn.
no, I love this book because when I started studying voice years ago, one thing led to another. I was on a speed dating event and someone recommended Linkletter Voice. This is back in 2001, 2002. And that when I got to that world, it just talked about the psychology of voice and letting go of the stuff and becoming a 5-year-old again. And a lot of your book talks about the psychology, the things that are in the way toward unleashing the voice, not just about vocal techniques. It goes well beyond that. So that's why I'm very fascinated by your approach to things.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So you were touring at some point. You started doing master classes,
Mhm.
and this is prior to your first book, right? You were doing this for quite some time, I imagine, right?
Yeah, well, it all sort of overlapped. The book became, as I was sort of alluding to, I was writing the same emails, and someone said, you should just put it into a book. And I remember thinking, kind of like your question about teaching. Well, I don't think I'm a teacher. I've never thought of writing a book. And both happened very organically. So, um, that book actually came out when I was on tour with Cirque du Soleil. So I had been writing it for years. Actually, it's funny, I had even lost the book once. That's another conversation. I uh, I had it finished, polished, ready to go. I was doing the final edit in Italy, and then my laptop was stolen, and my
Ouch.
um, my disc back home was corrupted. So I had to rewrite the whole thing, if you can imagine.
Wow.
And it
Wow.
ended up being, I
Hmm.
hope, better. Certainly had more experiences. So
I'm
all
sure.
of it was an evolution.
Were you touring in Italy or were you just visiting Italy? And as it happened?
No, when I lost the book, I was actually on a family trip for a
Okay.
month in Italy, and I brought it thinking I'll have this great trip and I'll do the final edit. And I was so excited. And then I went to pick up my backpack in Rome at this actually a really nice hotel, and it was very light. And I looked in my bag and my laptop was
Got
gone.
it. I
So yeah, I thought, well, that's a shame. I can't work on it on this trip, but I'll
hmm.
I'll get home and work and
And you
there's
made it better. And you made it better.
I
right?
think so.
Yeah.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, 3 books later, and you're working your fourth book too as well. So we'll talk about some of that, the evolution. And you've gone on to do some major work. I mean, since you and I first connected years ago, now you're, consulting with major organizations, companies. What are you proud of on this journey as far as people you've coached, impacted? What are
Wow.
you proud of? What are you proud of?
Mm, that's a great question. What am I proud of? Well, at the risk of sounding cliche or cheesy, I'm proud of everything. I mean,
Mm,
I'm proud of showing up. I'm proud of saying yes to every opportunity. It's a big thing in my life. I believe in saying yes to everything,
mm,
uh, and then figuring it out. I'm proud of my clients. I'm proud of the work we do. I'm proud of the books I write. I'm proud of the family
mm,
that I have. But I want to be clear that pride doesn't occur to me as that word doesn't occur to me as prideful. It's a humble
mm.
proud. It's a humble
Yes.
proud. It's like,
Yes.
and it's an proud to me is it's an honor, I think is more. So I'm honored.
Absolutely.
I'm honored to
Yes.
do all of the work that I do
Yes.
and the life I live and the family I have.
Yes. How has being a mom shifted? So I know you're a psychotherapist, right? And that's
Mhm.
part of your training too. And I
Yeah.
really, really honor that. You've also done a lot of leadership work. We met at a leadership training many years ago.
Yeah.
And you even coached me in facets of that. I was looking through my notes. I have hundreds of log files from different things, especially around voice and speaking, communication and singing.
Yeah.
I've been working with the singing coach for the past year and a half. Like for me, it's taking in information, applying it, avoiding deja vu. Deja vu is basically the idea of, or insanity, the idea of doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
So, mhm.
For me, feedback is very vital, and one of the reasons why I built Success Circles and some of the other ventures we have. So I have a lot of the feedback you gave me personally years ago,
Oh, great.
around relational presence was one of those things.
Mm.
Um, how has the journey shifted from you doing all that work, becoming a psychotherapist, and
Mhm.
now becoming a mom, right? We talked about that before the session started a little bit. I'm
Yeah.
curious. I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, they were two monumental kinds of shifts. I'll speak to the first one and the
Yes.
psychotherapy and then the mom. So, so much of my work intuitively before I went back to grad school was psychological. So many people, as you might have discovered in your year and a half of voice lessons or even before,
Mm,
and certainly this as I know you're very self-aware and integrated in your sense of being. Um, so many seeming technical
mm,
issues, vocal, physical,
mm,
breathing, seem to be purely somatic,
mm,
but 9 times out of 10, in my experience, they're caused or exacerbated by some emotional or relational thing. So here I was as a singer, working with singers, and I kept bumping up against, well, I know that the issue is manifesting in the
mm,
way the voice sounds or the way that the body is held,
mm,
but that's not the cause. There's something in them going on, some
mm,
sort of self protection or proving or pleasing or pushing or pausing. Something is so intuitively, I did that for years and then decided to go back to grad school in psychology to get the academic underpinning of what I'd been
yes.
doing intuitively for years. And that was very helpful. I mean, it was all learning is always
Mm,
helpful.
mm,
I'm still guided very much, I think, by intuition and just decades of doing this.
yes.
um, but more officially saying, I'm going to really, we're focusing on you holistically, not just vocally, not just
Yeah.
physically, has been great. And then your second question about being a mom, that's one of those things, right, Joseph? A line in the sand. It's
Mm,
like there's a before and an after,
mm,
not just of your life and your experience, but of in my experience of who you are, who you know
mm,
yourself to be.
mm.
And it's one of those things that you could never explain to someone who hasn't had a child what that's like, right?
Yeah.
So, and I could never have imagined what I
Mm,
would know now and what I'm learning now.
mm.
Um, so specifically, I think, were you asking me how being a mom impacts my work? What specifically about being a
I,
mom are you asking about?
I think so. When my sister had her children first, and then eventually I became a dad myself,
Yeah.
um, all of a sudden this idea of generational had meaning to it. And
Mm-hmm.
particularly for me, it was noticing that my behavior also affects the people who see me as a mentor, particularly my
Yeah.
kids, my sister's kids. So
Hmm.
it had me reshift how I saw accountability, right? And
Oh,
I did
wow.
accountability in our community as we rise to the expectations of our peer group. But now
Hmm.
it's rising to a level because by me not handling the thing, I could see my kids kind of mimicking that behavior.
Hmm.
For example, for many years, I had imposter syndrome running my life, being a
Mm.
fraud. And people could see it. I got to be part of different masterminds, men's groups, coaching circles, and like, I would say that, and they're like, "Oh, we knew that. We knew that was running the show."
Wow.
Until I got some really deep therapeutic coaching, kind of going back to the experience where I made that incident happened,
Yeah.
where I was able to kind of unravel that.
Oh,
And then
great.
I've done a lot of unraveling. I'm sure with you working with clients, as a therapist, as a coach, as a leader in front of room organizations,
Mhm.
um, people have shifts. And in that shift, the voice comes out in a different way than
Absolutely.
just like adjusting someone's posture or,
Yeah.
or just doing a Pilates class, right? Right.
Yeah.
It goes beyond that because it's more sustainable. So I was just
Mhm.
curious for you how being a parent, for me, it's ever changing, ever shifting. And
Mhm.
our kids are musically talented too. My daughter's doing musical theater.
Mm.
Both our kids perform. My daughter will be Matilda, and they both perform on stage in the
Great.
summertime, and they both sing.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
for me, expression is the truest form, and
Mm.
removing anything in the way of full expression, which is what I know what you're about too. So I was
Mhm.
just curious about parenting and have if anything shifted for you since then.
Yeah, well, it's interesting hearing you talk about generational. Um, I think that's been in my awareness, but that's not primary for me. I think the thing, one of the many things, but that pops into my mind is the thing that shifted most of all was perspective or
Mm,
is perspective.
mm,
I think that I thought before I had Lucas that I was busy or that I was objective
mm,
or that
mm,
I many things, but having this child and this reprioritization of what I thought mattered and seeing myself differently through that lens
mm,
of the role that I play and where I had put in where I had put my sense of power and priority and purpose before
mm,
and how that altered overnight.
mm.
And so not only to see what those new priorities are, but just the power of seeing that things can shift so powerfully.
Yeah,
Those things for me, I think as a parent were incredibly and remain incredibly important. I mean, I
mm,
think that um, that adage of don't take yourself so, if you want to be a serious person, don't take yourself so
yeah,
serious. If you want to be
yeah.
taken seriously, don't take yourself so seriously.
Right.
I think that we can get very myopic when
Mm,
we are by ourselves, for ourselves, in it
mm,
for ourselves. And I don't mean selfish or that people that don't have children can't have that, but when our perspective, even with children, becomes very focused and
mm,
myopic, we
mm.
lose that panoramic sense of why we're here and that we're a grain of sand and that we are insignificant and therefore can become significant
Yes,
rather than
yes.
thinking ourselves and our work so important. So
I love that.
that's something I definitely was gifted from our sweet son.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And is he also applying these vocal techniques too? Are you teaching him to be expressed
Well, it's
and
interesting. No, I made a conscious choice to
mm,
not push in any way
mm,
anything on Lucas. John and I made that choice that I sing because I can't help to sing, but
mm,
sing, I do it
mm.
all the time. And John has his passions and we've sort of in word and action encouraged Lucas to pursue whatever his passions are. And
Yeah.
he, I think, thank goodness, is incredibly musical and has phenomenal rhythm. He's a drummer and a violist,
Wow. He is.
by
Wow.
both by his own choice, interesting.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also plays baseball and
Yes.
basketball and things that I don't know anything about. I was a soccer player. And so it's wonderful to see him and we bond and bind together over music and are constantly drumming in the car together and singing. But I also am very mindful to encourage everything that he's passionate about. And it's
Yes.
it's tricky, right, Joseph? Because
Yes.
we have um, we have our own interests and our own hopes and our own fears and our
Mm,
own things that it is a daily moment to moment
mm.
kind and loving self-analysis of, am I being
Mm,
objective? Am I being the best mom I can be? Am I being
mm.
myself? Am I being, great and gracious? Am I allowing this person to become this person rather than in
Yes,
any way who or how I would like for him to be? Or, and so it is a daily, as I'm sure you and your wife know, just a daily honor and learning and enjoy. But yes, he's musical and many other things.
of course he is. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure he learns through osmosis and being around you and both of you. I
Yeah.
had a coach back in 2011, somebody we were both working with at the time, and she knew I had aspirations of getting married one day. Um, and she challenged me to start hanging around other married couples. So, and you guys would have these monthly get-togethers in your house,
Yes.
in the city, in New York City. So I'd go to your house and, just connect with friends and other like-minded people, growth-minded people. And then, every once in a while you'd give me some coaching. It's like you offer me some relational presence, some feedback. Of course, I'd ask you. You were generous about it. Um, and as the year progressed, eventually that December 2012, I met my wife. Right, got married in a very short amount of time. So that coaching advice worked, right?
Mhm.
And I do believe proximity is a big part of life, and who are around, we kind of emulate and we kind of become in some way, some form. So, and I believe too, my journey, even through childhood and who was around, um, the peer groups, people around had a huge
Mhm.
impact in those decisions we have.
Yeah.
Not just our parents, but even can be beyond that too as well.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so certainly thank you for that. I have all your, like I said, the feedback, coaching you gave me at the time. We even had you speak in the power team. I lead a community in New York City where we
Yes.
bring great speakers, leaders on board, and you were really fantastic with our audience back then too. They
Thank
loved
you.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, talk about your books. You have three books, and your fourth
Mhm.
book's coming out, right? So,
Yeah.
um, what's your fourth book about, and what's the legacy that the books are leaving with
Mhm.
you, of course, leading and
Yeah.
continue to facilitate.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for those very kind words. I'm so thrilled for you and your family, and I couldn't be happier. And I feel so honored and humbled that John and I might be people and have a life and a love that could be inspiring to others. We definitely are. We both feel like we're each the luckiest. So
Mm, mm,
so
mm,
that's a wonderful thing. But to your question about the books, and thank you for that. I am sort of I like to tease myself to others that I'm a bit of a stubborn one trick pony.
mm,
As you have mentioned, I work with singers, but I do a lot of corporate work and as a therapist, and I still can't and don't want to yet get off of the conversation that I have had for decades with singers. There's such I feel a need, and I know it's a niche, but so this fourth book is going to continue and wrap up the conversation about
mm,
with singers. I mean, other people read it. I have architects email
mm,
me saying they read the book you held up and that it changed them. And so it uses singing as a vehicle or sort of the access point
mm,
to all of these points about communication, self expression,
mm,
fear, performance anxiety, self worth, the over correlating our self worth with any passion. So this book addresses that last piece, sort of the
mm,
perils. We live in an interesting culture that asks, "Who are you, and what do you dare to dream and be, and what makes you special?" And this book is really exploring, and I'm so enjoying it,
mm,
not in any religious way, but a more spiritual side of how can you look really closely at that proposition
mm,
and see, in my opinion, the perils of doing so. I think that the minute we correlate our sense of self-worth with anything, that we are
mm,
doomed, if not to fail, we are doomed to not enjoy, at
mm,
least in the long run. So this is
mm,
what that book is about. But I will say
mm,
the next book, which is drafted,
mm, mm,
or outlined, is not for it's not about singers, it's about self-expression in general, and everything from the four books as it applies to more of my corporate
yeah.
speakers, humans, rather than through the lens of singing. So I like to say I'm going to have 5 books by the time I'm in my 50s. And so that's the plan. That's
Awesome.
the hope. So
What are some tips. So we have a separate podcast called momentumtips.com. So we might
Okay,
add this to as well. What
please,
are
yeah.
some tips that people can take on? Let's say not let's say entrepreneurs or even singers. Let's say, like, I know your
Sure.
audience, your next book is really writing to the singer, and you've had different leaders pick your books and get tremendous value. What are some tips other than like being hydrated, which I'm doing now? What are some basic tips people could take on to be more expressed, be more engaging, to be more of their authentic selves, to trust what they're saying is of
Mm,
value in a boardroom
mm,
or being unleashed on stage. I know those are two
mhm,
two two lengths, right? Someone is a musician on stage singing versus being in a boardroom. A lot
mm,
of our members are entrepreneurs. What are some tips that they can take on?
yeah. Well, let's take one physical and one emotional. So I think that the one of the most important things we can do, which is often underrated in singing technique and speaking technique, and I think in life, Joseph, you might agree, is that I think observation is an incredibly powerful tool. We often think that being in action is what gets results, and of course it does, but observation can be really, really critical as well. So I think speakers, singers, all of us, to take a moment or time as a practice to really not analyze or intellectually think about our bodies and our breathing and our voice, but to sort of observationally scan ourselves, to observe ourselves as the vehicle of communication that we are, and
Mm,
see, where am I halted and hindered? Where is my energy not flowing and flying? And where am I stuck? I have family members, I have friends, I have clients that
mm,
hold their breath.
mm.
They don't know it, and I'll say to them, if they ask, it's always invited. And I'll say, do you realize that you're holding your breath constantly? And they'll go, I know I'm not. So,
Yeah.
simple things
Got
like
it.
that,
Yes.
when we're calm, but as
Mm,
well when we're nervous or getting ready to step up to the proverbial
yeah.
plate. Where do we hold our breath? Where do we hold our tension? Where do we hold our energy?
Mm,
Where do we want to feel those things in our body? How do we feel when we're relaxed and feeling safe and comfortable? And how can
yes.
we create that when we are in places where we tend not to feel that way? So I think that's one thing.
Yes.
And then
Mm,
um, another practice I think can be really good is, I think that as speakers, singers,
mm,
leaders, we think a lot about the what of what
mm,
we want to say.
mm,
But I think the how is as, if not more important. I
mm,
think that when we think about the tips and the tricks and the tools and
mm,
memorizing what we want to say, that can be very useful. But energy speaks louder than our
mm.
words. And our intention is more important, I think, than the content of our
Yeah.
speeches or deliveries. So to really think about, through the lens, I love reward theory in psychology, which says we always pick the thing that we are, whether we know it or not, actually committed to.
Right.
If we're committed to, um, being thought of as a great speaker, or if we're committed to getting the highest paying gig, or if we're committed to, being fully memorized, there's nothing wrong with those goals. But I find much more inspiring and certainly um, ease granting goals to be, how can I make a difference for someone? Can I say something in a way, whatever it is that comes out of my mouth energetically, that leaves people feeling inspired or
Yes.
helped or heard. So I think that that's a really underestimated piece, sort of the
Yes.
how.
Yes.
And that's what I encourage clients and singers,
Beautiful.
speakers, all of them to.
Beautiful. I mean, it's very well said. That's all along the feedback gave me years ago too, as well, which I might
Oh, great.
pull up. Yeah, and just noticing where we kind of hold breath, right, in the
Yeah.
space relationally within others, whether it's with a loved one or with a child or in a group, and noticing too that as we do that, it's very possible that the audience that's there also will be holding their breath too.
We're mirrors for each other. But
And
yeah,
again, it's like watching a good movie. You see the protagonist, and there's a scene happening, and there's that moment where the audience holds their breath, right? And
yeah.
it's like potentially robbing our audience at times of
Mm,
fully breathing, like gifting themselves that. And there
yeah.
is a way of going through the process. And I noticed you're so good at the acknowledgement. Like when we connected years ago, you're so um, incredible as it relates to being fully there and acknowledging that person where they
Mhm.
have the room to like breathe and to,
Oh,
take
yeah.
a breath in, right? And maybe even create more space to be able to, say what's next for themselves. And I think it's very vital, especially in relationships. And one of my love languages, my wife knows this, is words of affirmation. We all have love languages. My wife, it's quality time. And I think
Yeah.
the more we know about each other and we embrace, acknowledge, we hold space for the other person to show up,
Hmm.
um, great things can come out of that. To do
Yeah.
that one-on-one is very unique, but then also to be able to do that in a room, right?
Hmm.
Giving a TED talk, perhaps, to an
Hmm.
audience.
Hmm.
One of your bits of feedback to me was taking more pauses, right? Because I tend
Mm.
to fill up space, and sometimes filling up space might give the perception of why is he trying to overqualify himself, right, in
Hmm.
the moment by
I
filling
like,
up room.
yeah.
Uh, and I still tinker with that once in a while. I still forget that once in a while.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, you're touching on something that I think is a challenge for a lot of us, not only experientially, but linguistically, this idea of performance, right?
mm,
The word, there's no problem in my experience. I write a lot about language in the books, but there's nothing wrong with any language, but so often we're not even aware of the constraints of language. So the word perform for so many people, consciously and not, has this sort of
yes.
background of an us versus them, or a me in front of, or a fearful. There's this sort of onness to it. So I think when I work with people, I sometimes just have them abandon all language and say, well, what do you want to feel when you're standing on, another word, a stage,
Mm,
talking
mm,
to people? And I think if those who are able, those of us who can get into a place of it feeling like a conversation
mm,
and a communion and a connection,
mm,
I think and then if you want to relabel it performance, if,
mm,
as something that reflects that,
mm.
that's fine. But I think that the breath holding, the onness for many
Yes.
people, not necessarily you, the wanting to fill up space, in my experience, all comes from this desire that it should be done a certain way, and we want to look a certain way, and we want to have a certain effect. There's a goal other than
Yes.
connection, conversation, communion.
Yes.
In my experience, when those three things are primary,
Yes.
then the result called performance is achieved.
I love that. I love that. It really makes a lot of sense, right? And I align with that completely. It's having a conversation. It goes a longer way. Some of
Yeah.
the best communicators out there tend to ask questions and be engaging, and they
Mm-hmm.
pause, and they're good at storytelling and much more. They bring it together. And they
Mm-hmm.
get feedback from their audience too sometimes. So look for, how's it
Absolutely.
landing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, interrupt me and redirect me, Joseph, but I love saying that even though when I'm doing keynotes, I do a lot of speaking and lectures and workshops, I'm the one talking. The words are coming out of my mouth, but I really am listening
Mm,
as much, even with you. You've asked me a question or something and I'm talking, but I'm
mm,
looking at you, I'm listening to you,
mm,
I'm feeling your response to my response. It is a
mm,
conversation. And I
mm,
think perhaps counterintuitively, when we let go of performance and we're just with each other and
mm,
connecting and
mm,
vibing or conversing, people come away with a sense usually of, wow, that was a great speech. That was a great talk. That person was really a great
mm,
performer. When really, I think what it's pointing to is that person was comfortable. That
mm.
person was confident, not as a pushing of themselves, but just in themselves. And I
Yeah.
think that is what makes performance anxiety go away when we
Mm.
get rid of the notion that it's a performance at all.
I love that. Yeah, I'm gonna remind my daughter about too. She's great on stage. She was on stage this past weekend for 2 days, dancing and all of that, and but she's really great at this, and I believe as we get to different audiences in our classroom and other settings, it's useful to let go of that performance, as you mentioned, right? And to really show up and really own our power, our worth, which I know is the topic of your next book.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. What are some rituals you embrace each day to kind of keep you engaged? Maybe start of your day, end your day,
Mhm.
practices. What are
Mhm.
some things you do?
Well, one thing I do all the time, not in a required by, but
Mm,
in a desired desire for,
mm.
I wake up, I don't look at a phone, I don't we ongoingly in our house are always noticing the impact of too much
Yes,
phone.
screen
We're
time. Yeah.
convinced they're just
Yes.
addictive. But I have always been someone who doesn't have my phone in the morning. I wake up, I make myself a tea or a coffee, and I go for a long walk.
Love that.
And I just
Mm,
let my mind wander. I look at the sunrise, I breathe, I dream, and I just have this moment of a languageless
mm,
sort of connection to nature and outside, but also the rhythm of it because it's, you
mm,
know, need the sunrise and sunset are they're slow. And I
mm,
think that they really ground me in
mm,
perspective. You
mm,
know, I'm this tiny little thing in this huge universe
mm,
in a wonderful sense of smallness, you know.
mm, mm,
But also the pacing of it. On the
mm,
rare occasions that I've for whatever reason woken up because a parent is called or something and I've
mm.
had my phone first thing, I can feel it the whole day. You know,
Yes.
if I've been, let me quickly check email and then I have to answer this and then that. It's like a brrr.
It's like doing mode at
Yeah,
that point, right? And the context of your day is just that. I get that. Yeah.
completely. So I really value that and I feel the difference, even if it's raining, snowing, doesn't matter. I always go.
I love that.
So I really notice it on those rare
Mm,
occasions when for some reason
mm.
I don't go.
And it's good to get sunlight in the eyes to kind of reset the circadian rhythm, they say.
Yes.
Just
And
a bunch
yeah,
of
I look into the sun when it's very low on the horizon. I try to do the same thing in the evenings. Those are my big ones.
yeah.
I also sometimes I love poetry. I have a
Mm,
couple books of
mm,
poetry, a few in the kitchen,
mm,
and once or twice a day, especially if my mind is wandering, I'll just open one to any page and I'll read, I'll stop and I'll read and I'll take it in and I'll sort of just as
mm.
I'm making another tea, just sort of meditate or allow it to meditate
Who's
through
one of your
me.
favorite poets?
Oh, I love Mary Oliver.
Okay.
She's
Oh,
amazing. And her book Devotions is sitting right there. And I'll just flop it open. And
love it.
whatever I read, always just,
Hmm.
she writes a lot about nature. So that's
Hmm.
a big, but she's
Hmm.
great if you don't know her.
Awesome. I'll
Yeah.
definitely look into that.
Yeah.
Your advice to me years ago too was to embrace more curiosity, more awe,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly in the other as we're connecting. And there's value in that. You just mentioned that too with nature, right? Just being
Yeah.
able to go outside and embrace curiosity, being more inquisitive about
Mm-hmm.
things.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that gets lost. And I believe so. We also I teach entrepreneurs how to scale their businesses, and
Oh,
we
great.
talk about technology and AI too is there too.
Uh-huh.
Um, and however good AI is and how disruptive it can be, there is an element of I think you said the word before, like awe, right? Um, interest when and I think the word so even going deeper into the conversation. So my journey of um, advancing, evolving as a leader, as a speaker, as a communicator. I used to be an engineer. I left that world, and a lot of the coaching I got was about learning to feel more, right? Feel
Mm-hmm.
more into the other, feel more in life, learn how to emote, all those things. And I went through a whole process to kind of figure that whole thing out. A lot of it was letting go, releasing, letting go, right? All of that. Um, it's interesting seeing this new era now with technology and um, how people things are getting lost a bit
Mm-hmm.
in a way, right? So it's interesting
Yeah.
seeing that. What are your thoughts about this kind of new world? And I know your husband's a technologist too as well, things you've
Mm-hmm.
seen. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I know it's easy to have well, let me say it differently. I find it tempting to have
Mm,
I feel tempted, and I think we're all tempted, not just in technology, but in everything, to have an opinion about everything, right? Is something good? Is AI bad? Is it good? Do I like it? Do I not? Is it going to ruin the culture? Is it going to save the culture? Um, I think I try back to humility too. And interestingly, I am going to answer your question, but parenting is always there too. I don't know if you have this with your kids, but um, I try to not have a firm opinion about many things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not because I don't value my impulses and instincts, but
Hmm.
because I don't know. And where I find that valuable, and then I promise I'll come back to AI,
Yes, no, it's good.
is my son the other day, we passed a sign. Someone was supporting a war against a war. I honestly can't remember. And he said, "Where do we fall on that?"
Hmm.
And I said, "Well, sweetheart," I said, "I don't know where you fall on that."
Hmm. Hmm.
Because John and I have worked very hard
Hmm.
to not talk politics, to not say we
Yeah.
hate this one or like this one, no matter how we feel.
Hmm.
We always try to, and I know this might be controversial for people, but
Hmm.
especially today, but we always try to play devil's advocate. If we don't watch the news around him, listen to the news around him, our son's 12.
Yeah.
Um, when something, even something obviously not good happens, we'll say, well, yeah, we don't necessarily agree with that. What do you think? But let's, because the world is not black and white, it's gray. Let's just put ourselves in that person's shoes. Or let's just imagine what people on the other side of the issue think and like argue their point, kind of like a debate team.
Yes.
So I hope that our son has got an ability, and he seems to, he'll talk about at school, everyone hates this person or everyone believes this. And we always say, well, what do you think? And
Love
he,
that.
thank
Yeah.
goodness, says, Mom, I don't know enough about it, which John and I go, oh, we've done something right. Um,
That's
so coming back to your point about AI,
yeah.
and we're committed to that.
Yes.
Of course, we have values. We share those with him, but we really try
Mm.
to encourage open-mindedness.
It's so important. It really is. Thank you for that.
And and so
Yeah.
with AI, I have opinions about AI. It concerns me as a writer, for example.
Mm.
I've never used AI. I
Mm.
will not use it to edit it. I will not use it to write it. No judgment to those who do.
Mm.
But I am concerned that
Mm.
um, I am concerned that on the one hand, I can see that it's a tool, and like every tool, it can be a phenomenal tool for all of
Mm.
us. And I can also see that, like other tools, it can cause us to rely less upon ourselves and even can hinder frankly, our intelligence and our skills. Our son goes to a Waldorf school. I don't know if you're
Mm.
familiar with
Yes, I
Waldorf
do.
schools.
Yeah.
So they don't use technology until eighth grade. And
Yeah.
we value, I mean, he of course uses, you know, he has very little time on the screens, but he's adept. And
Yeah.
I noticed the difference between,
Yeah.
I noticed that difference. And
Yeah.
so this is probably a very long-winded and rambling answer to the
No,
question,
it's
but
it's it's a great. I'm learning a lot. I'm always
yeah.
learning from modeling and hearing. Um, it's a great answer. I mean, our daughter went to Montessori school for a number of years.
Okay.
She came out
Yeah.
of that, and the nature of putting things away and low tech been very useful.
Yes.
And of course, there's me. I come downstairs to my office and see all these screens and so
Yes.
forth. Um, I think really asking, really diving and asking them what their thought is, what their thoughts are, versus
Yeah.
having the media, having the things we watch influence their behavior, or even our thoughts too. And
Yeah.
there's something I've learned too over the years on my journey of growth training is releasing judgment, right? Or that creates separation. And especially if we're
Yes.
looking to engage people from different backgrounds, different beliefs. I lead
Yes.
a community of people all around the world, right? And we have accountability partnerships. And not everyone's like-minded. You might people have people in Israel, you might have members in Pakistan, you might have members in South America, Canada, different mindsets.
Right.
And we all have a very similar outcome, which is to get better as entrepreneurs, as leaders. And how do we hold the space, knowing that the person we're engaging with might have different beliefs, hold them to a high standard, hold them to what they say they're going to do.
Yes.
Um, And it takes something. It really does. But the moment we judge, we lose our ability to influence that person, right?
Yes.
Or even show up in our fully express self-expressed way. The moment we start, creating that kind of separation. So I
Mhm.
think it's so vital to be able to, teach our kids at a young age and
Yeah.
to not allow judgment to get in the way of themselves and the other or their
Yeah.
classmates or the people that they care for.
Well, you just touched upon a couple things that I really value, and that, well, everything you say I value, but you mentioned judgment and you said awe earlier. And I really
Mm.
do think that awe and wonder, this sort of beginner's mind,
Yeah.
is so important to walk through life. And judgment to that you were talking about, judgment implies that there's a right, that there's a right and a wrong, that we can know
Mm,
facts.
mm,
And I want to be clear, I'm not saying we shouldn't have values and things that we stand up for. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have those things, but I do think that when you look over history,
mm.
um, the notion of right changes so much.
Yes, it
And
does.
to
Yeah.
to bring it back to our conversation about
Mm,
singing and performing, I'll give you just one example. I know that I'll work with a lot of singers who come in and they're talking about technique and their support and resonance in the palate, or speakers that are
mm,
talking about projection and articulation and diction. And that can be very valuable.
mm.
But again, back to myopia, if you get focused on, I know it's the right thing to do it, you're to breathe this way or to think this way or to, and this and this and this way, this way, this way, you miss the whole world of possibility of what other ways
Mm,
might serve you now and later.
mm.
Being right about something also stops you in your growth. Like there might be one way I think about singing or speaking or politics
Yes,
today. But if I'm right about it, if I'm judgmental, then it totally also precludes me from seeing how I might grow and change and how the world might
yes,
grow and change, or how in singing and speaking, my body might grow and change. So I think it's really loosening those constraints that are actually shackles
yes,
um,
yes.
on ourselves and our perception. It's so important to your point about judgment.
That's so great, right? That's fantastic. Well, I really got a lot of value out of the conversation. Our audience will too as well. So how do people tap into your genius, your wisdom? Where do they go?
Thank you, Joseph. I can't believe time flies with you. It's amazing. I could talk to you for hours, but my website is findingyourvoice.com. There are links to everything on there, and please don't hesitate, everyone out there, to reach out if ever I can be of service.
And any one conversation with Jennifer will go a long way. Like everything you've told me before is gold, right? And it lands and it continues to land years later. It's made
Wow.
me a better person, and the values of the communities that I lead tend to be just that: make the day better, make each other better. So I appreciate all of that.
Oh, thank you. That makes my day to hear. And I appreciate you too, Joseph. Thank you.
Excellent. For our audience, go to rulesforsuccess.com, tap into this, the recording, some shorter summaries from the segment as well. And we'll also have some mini podcasts at momentumtips.com. Thanks so much, Jennifer.
Thank you.